What do you mean people? Which people think that?
Joe Rogan fans. I get like I run into these people. I start arguing with people, and they start citing me. But what about?
I'm a Joe Rogan fan, and I appreciate the vaccine.
That's good. I'm glad you do. But there's definitely
but you said there's a type. There's a type. What's the type? What's the type of Joe Rogan fan?
Anti-establishment.
I think that's not Joe Rogan. That's a general public discourse. There's a default anti-establishment on the right and the left. That's the default easy thing to go to.
I think Joe Rogan fans are definitely a certain type of anti-establishment, though. Like I could guess the Joe Rogan fan. Like if I were to do general population versus Joe Rogan fan, who do you think is more likely to be anti-vaccine?
Do you have data on this? Or are you just guessing?
Yeah. Just guessing.
The woke streamer Destiny went on the Lex Fridman podcast, and on this podcast, they brought up the subject of Joe Rogan. And of course, Destiny, being the woke streamer that he is, even though Joe Rogan is much more left-leaning than most people out there, is much more liberal than definitely any right-wingers, any right-wing commentators or anything like that, of course, he is like the ultimate alt-righter in all these woke idiots' eyes, such as Destiny. And whenever Lex Fridman brings up the topic to Destiny of Joe Rogan, he starts to go in on Joe Rogan, and Lex Fridman absolutely shuts him down. Let's get into this clip here from the Lex Fridman podcast of Lex Fridman destroying Destiny whenever they are brought up Joe Rogan.
To be had about a lot of stuff related to how we handled the coronavirus. You know, were lockdowns effective? Was there enough data to support the huge measures we took? You know, why didn't we have the option to show I was infected a month ago? Why do I need to be vaccinated? Why wasn't that option ever a thing in the United States? I don't think it was. There are really good questions to be asked there, but all the people asking the questions are also trying to tell you that ivermectin and monoclonal antibodies are the way to go for everything, and the vaccine is evil, and they're just going to turn you gay like the frogs. Yeah, and it's like, Jesus, like you can't, there's like no place to reasonably criticize from, because all of the people that are criticizing aren't doing it with an open mind, or you know, they're not reading studies or doing anything. They're saying like, I do my own research, which means they listen to whatever the last guy on Joe Rogan said, and now they're parroting that opinion 100%.
Easy no.
Yeah.
Easy no, bro.
The last guy on Joe Rogan, not Joe Rogan, okay? That Robert Malone guy on Joe Rogan got me real fired up.
That's one guest.
People see him as like the father of mRNA technology. He published one paper, okay?
What do you mean people? Which people think that?
Joe Rogan fans. I get like I run into these people. I start arguing with people, and they start citing me. But what about?
I'm a Joe Rogan fan, and I appreciate the vaccine.
That's good. I'm glad you do. But there's definitely
but you said there's a type. There's a type. What's the type? What's the type of Joe Rogan fan?
Anti-establishment.
I think that's not Joe Rogan. That's a general public discourse. There's a default anti-establishment on the right and the left. That's the default easy thing to go to.
I think Joe Rogan fans are definitely a certain type of anti-establishment, though. Like I could guess the Joe Rogan fan. Like if I were to do general population versus Joe Rogan fan, who do you think is more likely to be anti-vaccine?
Do you have data on this? Or are you just guessing?
Yeah, just guessing.
Yeah, I think you are actually judging.
I am.
I think you're judging, because I think you're also. The beautiful thing about podcasting, this could be similar to streaming, is there's a large number of people that just listen. Like, what does it mean to be a Joe Rogan fan?
I don't think you just listen. I think people listen and absorb the information.
I would say that the Joe Rogan fan base is as divided in the vaccine as the general public.
Gotcha. Man, I'm going to look for polling data on that. I'm sure somebody's got to have done it out there, but...
No, but you're basically revealing the fact they have no data. You're using your own judgment.
For sure. Based on how he's had conversations about how his experience with the coronavirus, and then based on the guests that have come on that have talked and echoed a lot of like anti-vax talking points and been completely unchallenged, and then based on statements he's made about like myocarditis and the vaccine and everything as well, yeah.
So it's the level of challenge or not that he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and then what his true positions are, and then the types of guests.
Well, of course, I mean, that's kind of Joe Rogan's job. You know, that's kind of the corner of the internet that Joe Rogan has taken over, is providing the information that the actual mainstream media is unwilling to provide. And he's providing it on a mass scale because his show is so big, because he's uncancelable, because Joe Rogan is bigger than anybody. He's bigger than Destiny, he's bigger than Lex Fridman, he's bigger than all mainstream media. He's uncancelable. And he's already gotten his paycheck, so it doesn't really matter if he gets fired or his contract gets cut, or it doesn't matter. And whenever Joe Rogan realizes through his own personal experience, hey, these guys on mainstream media, they might be lying. They might not be telling us the full truth. The government might not be telling us the full truth. Maybe this lockdown stuff is BS, but I can't find anybody with that opinion on mainstream media. And yet I have all these people in my email asking me to come on my show that say they're doctors, that say they're credentialed, and yet they're not nobody's bringing them on mainstream media. Maybe I should try to bring them on my show. That's what happens, you know? It's not like it's not like how Destiny and these woke idiots make it seem out to be, where he's just out to get the establishment. And I wouldn't even think that's a bad thing if he was, but I just don't think Joe Rogan is like that. I genuinely think that Joe Rogan is just a curious human, and whenever he has experiences in his life that makes him question certain things, he brings guests onto his podcast that help him answer the questions around those certain things. I don't think Joe Rogan is like always anti-establishment. He's a leftist. He's on Destiny's side probably way more than he's on my side for most things. It's just when it comes to the government, Destiny completely buys into the government, and whatever they tell him, he's going to listen. And whenever Joe Rogan is able to realize, hold on, in my personal life, I feel like I'm being lied to. Let me go seek out these guests, and then these credentialed guests go on the Joe Rogan Experience, and they, confirm the questions that Joe Rogan had as valid questions. Then it just sparks a snowball effect where he wants to go get more information, and more information brings on more guests from those fields. And then it causes people like Destiny to have meltdowns on Lex Fridman's podcast because Joe Rogan brings on guests that the mainstream media won't bring on.
He typically chooses to bring on to talk about the vaccines. Yeah.
Okay, but that represents somehow a deep anti-establishment feeling versus just the vaccine. I mean, I've seen the vaccine and other things being a thing that broke people.
I think all the coronavirus, that whole 1 or 2 years broke a lot of people.
There's a lot of emotion, and the emotion quickly solidified into an opinion that almost had nothing to do with like thinking through and updating your knowledge and so on. You just made up your mind.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it comes from that anti-establishment place. Like, what the vaccine represents the ultimate of establishment. It was a huge private company backed by a huge public government, and there's Fauci, and there's Biden, and there's Pfizer, and there's all these countries locking us up in our homes, telling us to do a thing. Like, the vaccine was like the ultimate submission tool to show you that the government owns you. Not only do you have to get injected once, it's a series, and then you got to get boosters, and it's like they're trying to keep you under their thumb, and that's the control. I feel like that vaccine became like the ultimate rallying cry between
you just said it yourself. Destiny just said exactly what happened. People like Joe Rogan were not always super anti-establishment, super anti big pharma, all this stuff. That whole 2020 situation turned all of these people into anti-establishment people. That's when you saw huge shifts in people like Joe Rogan and people like Russell Brand. And that's when you saw a lot of even people like Anna Kasparian start to wake up because of all the things that happened in 2020 with the riots, with the lockdowns, with the jabs, with everything. Then all these people who, like I said, probably agree politically with Destiny way more than they agree with me. But they turned anti-establishment and started bringing on anti-establishment people because they realized, hold on, I'm thinking these things, but I'm not actually alone. There's other people out there. The mainstream media and people like Destiny just refuse to platform them. So Destiny just admitted the actual truth himself right there.
You support? Are you a sellout that is going to believe whatever the government tells the sheep to take? Or are you going to be like the guy that stands against the crowd and gets fired from his job and pulls his kids from school because they're not going to let the evil Fauci medicine, jab them in the arm?
And the funny thing is, the crowd that stands against the institution is now larger than the crowd of sheep. There's one sheep standing there.
Sure, yeah. Or it feels that way sometimes.
One vaccinated sheep. Well, okay. What's the defense of institutions? How do you regain the trust of institutions? First of all, do you think that there's ways in which WHO, CDC failed? And do you think there's criticism towards Pfizer and the big pharma companies that's deserved?
Damn, there's the pharma companies. I'm not sure. For CDC and WHO, so here's a criticism that I have of all of academia, and I feel it's stronger and stronger every day. I don't think it's enough to be a researcher or to be correct about issues. Academia needs to...
If you enjoy content like this, to make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
Increase its ability to communicate. It is just an unbelievable, unmitigated failure that academics are unwilling to wade into the complicated topics that exist today because other people are,
First you call me spineless, and then you call me a bad communicator.
But no, look, you're here, you're doing it. So you get props for me, okay? Good job.
That motherfucker.
But there are so many, but I'm sure that you must have heard another fellow academic, a fellow colleague express some amount of frustration about, like, in their specific discipline, they know something to be true and they know that like a lot of the messaging is like wrong or bad in the public about it, but they're never going to step out and say anything because either one, they're very measured and careful with their take, which they feel is incompatible with what people want to hear, or two, they're really worried that they might be incorrect. So they're going to be cautious while everybody else is going out and like hardcore in their opinion.
And they also don't have the supportive institutions for them to go out on a limb.
Yeah, that too.
So like to take risks. For example, I've heard that with lab leak theory. I've had a lot.
By the way, notice how Lex Fridman just asked Destiny a question. Do you think these certain organizations could have done better with the 2020 stuff? And Destiny completely dodged the question, completely danced around it, because if he admits the truth, which if he's sitting across from Lex Fridman, I'm not the biggest Lex Fridman fan, but I know for a fact that if Destiny said no, which is what he's supposed to say, which is what his fan base wants him to say, Lex Fridman would have 100% pushed back against that. So he had to kind of dance around the question, and he did a good job at it. You know, Lex kind of forgot about it seems.
A lot of biologists, virologists, friends that are like, yeah, it's obviously leaked from a lab.
Okay.
Like early on.
Oh, maybe. Okay. We can fight over this one, but sorry, go ahead. Keep talking.
We can fight over this. But like I should sort of backstep and say, like, that's like you talk about shooting the shit. You haven't really investigated, but it's your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. They would never say that publicly.
Of course.
Mostly because you're saying, like, what they would all say is, like, we want to see data.
Yeah, which would be good, which is fine.
So they're going with, like this is too many coincidences in the same place. That's the logic. But they don't want to say anything because there's no data. You need to have evidence. You need to have actual evidence to say one way or the other. There's that. But there's also, just like you said, I mean, effective communication. You're a fan of Sean Carroll.
Yes. He's like one of the only people in this whole planet that I like besides you. I love Sean Carroll.
Anytime Sean Carroll is brought up as evidence, there's a smile that comes over your face.
I love it.
Of like joy.
Yeah.
Of like a little kid thinking about Santa Claus. Okay, I love Sean Carroll too.
Just to be clear, I love Sean Carroll because I hate this divide between, like, you're either STEM or you're like philosophy, arts, and all that other stuff, and the two worlds can never cross. And I love that he was so good at physics, but like explores and pays attention to all of the like sociological stuff too. It's so rare to find that quality in a person.
He's legit one of the really, really, really special minds. But you don't have.
It's because, yeah, in academia, if you're not completely bought in to the system that they tell you to, so like to the numbers that they provided, to the data that they provided, and to the stances that they tell you that you must have, then you get shunned. I talk about this all the time on this channel. One of the best examples that I can think of, especially since we're on the topic of Joe Rogan, this is actually a perfect example because Lex Fridman and Destiny are talking about Joe Rogan. You think about somebody like Graham Hancock, who provided evidence for, I believe it was the Atlantis situation, where, and many other situations as well, but let's just put it under the umbrella of archaeology. He provided evidence that what archaeologists are saying in mainstream media and mainstream archaeology is actually wrong. You know, there were much more advanced civilizations way before they're actually saying, and he got kicked out of the archaeology club, basically. Like, he got shunned, he got silenced, and now, because the internet is just growing and growing and growing, so prominent, now we're able to get information so quickly, and people are able to build brands outside of the mainstream brands. So Graham Hancock was able to build a brand outside of just mainstream archaeology, and because he was providing evidence that went against the mainstream archaeology, he was shunned from that. But then he went on podcasts such as Joe Rogan, and then people started to look into him even more and realize, holy shit, this guy's actually right. And, you know, just because he went against mainstream archaeology, and this happens in all kinds of, you know, science and you know, archaeology, actual big pharma. If anybody goes against what you're supposed to think, you get shunned, you get kicked out. Luckily, we have people out there like Joe Rogan who are willing to platform these people and at least see if they're full of shit or not. Turns out Graham Hancock was actually right about the whole thing, and now he's getting a Netflix special, or he has a Netflix special already. Like, he has a show on Netflix that explains a lot. I forget what the show's called. I'm sure somebody knows in the comments. It's a very popular show, you know, and it was a great show. I loved it. But the point being, people like Graham Hancock are all over the place. He's one of the happy stories, but there's a lot of people out there who were never discovered, who are pushing back against the mainstream narratives that we have in big pharma, in history, and in all these different fields. And you get shunned if you don't hold the mainstream narrative that you're supposed to have. Think about people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was supposed to be like some pioneer, some person who was thinking outside of the box always. And I'm sure he got approached by someone and said, hey man, you're getting a little bit too wild here. And now he just has the woke standpoint that everybody has on the woke side of things. He holds those exact beliefs. Like he's supposed to be this out the box thinker, this guy who's always like head in the stars, like always thinking about traveling further into space and stuff like that. He hates Elon Musk. And he hates anybody who's not extremely woke. That's the stance that they want you to have, though. And if he wasn't like that, he probably would get shunned from the scientific community, just like so many others have gotten, especially when you talk about the subjects that Lex Fridman and Destiny are talking about now. If anybody speaks out against, like Joe Rogan has had multiple people on his podcast that have been shunned from the scientific community just because they asked certain questions about the jabs. And guess what? They ended up being right over time. Or the people like Destiny and Lex Fridman are saying, we're talking about the lab leak stuff. And then, the organizations that are supposed to be the people who always give us the truth and the data backed arguments and stuff like that they're talking about, those 3-letter organizations had eventually come out and said, oh, actually, yeah, the lab leak theory is probably the most likely thing that happened and how this virus even started. And those people all got shunned and lost all credibility in those communities because they mentioned that up in the beginning. It's just wild. Like, imagine, it just makes you think, what were they telling us that was false that we still believe today before the internet existed? Because now that the internet exists, we can fact check these people. We get information so quickly now. But before the internet existed, they had a monopoly on all information. And anybody who challenged that information, they just got shunned from those communities. So imagine all the things that we currently still believe because we were taught it in the school system and nobody was allowed to challenge it, but we still believe it. Even with the internet, because it's so ingrained in us. If we never got the internet, dude, we would just be completely indoctrinated and brainwashed our entire lives. So shout out to the internet, man. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about Lex Fridman and Destiny going back and forth here about Joe Rogan. And of course, Destiny gets absolutely shut down by Lex Fridman because of the false statements that he's making about Joe Rogan. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole Destiny versus Lex Fridman and Joe Rogan situation.